Hey everybody, this is Joe, and welcome to a rainy, cloudy day in Albuquerque. And you know, I haven't been out in a while taking photos and kind of street photography style, and I really want to do that, so that's what I'm going to do on a rainy day. Let's go. So I have a few books I've done on Blurb, self-published, about street photography. There was a period of time, I would say from like 2010 to 2015 or 16, where I spent a lot of time hanging around the streets of Albuquerque taking photos, and I haven't done so in the last couple of years very much. So whenever it gets cloudy, I kind of get interested in doing this because the light is always so much better. You don't have the harsh shadows of the desert Southwest. Shadows are more subdued. But the streets of Albuquerque have changed in the last couple of years, especially along Central Avenue because of the Albuquerque Rapid Transit Project. A lot of businesses have gone out of business or moved, and things are different. And that's the part of town that I've been documenting for a long time. So I'm kind of interested to see what I can see, what I can find, and I'm going to try shoot some stills and some video. So a lot of the street photos that I created in the last 10 years, I put some of the better ones into a couple Blurb books, self-published books. And looking back on those books, I really enjoy the work that I did. I kind of like the body as a whole, but maybe looking back on it, it's more like that was just a phase, a project. And so me going out today and trying to take street photos might be a way of testing whether or not I still have it, whether there's still a vision for that, whether I can still do it with some kind of a focus and a purpose, or if it's just done and I need to go find another subject matter and another project to do. So I'm going to be kind of shooting in two different modes. I want to shoot in video mode, so I'm using my handheld tripod and the external mic. And then when I want to go into the still mode, I want to configure the camera to be a still camera. I want to take it off the tripod, take the mic off, so I have to have a place to store those. So I'm going to use my little shoulder bag to convert it back to a handheld street camera. So we're down in Nob Hill, and I'm just going to stroll around here. This is like East Nob Hill near Washington, and we'll see what we find. Well, anyway, look what we picked up here. Yeah, it's a Montgomery Wards Signature 200, which is a brother typewriter, in a case, no less. It's really, really grungy. Really grungy. Going to need a lot of cleaning. But here we are in Antique Specialty Mall and in East Central in Albuquerque, and they were having a sale, even better. Well, that was a pleasant surprise finding a brother typewriter branded as a Montgomery Wards. It's really, really filthy. One of the filthiest I've ever seen. But it has the hard case. The ribbon vibrator doesn't rise, but I was able to pull it up manually and verify the imprint. It looks like an Elite font machine. I think I can fix that vibrator problem. It might just be there's so much dirt there, but I think a linkage may be disconnected. I see the control rod when you type. I'm going to drive the car down closer to the center of Nob Hill and park again and wander around and get some more street photos if I can. Boy, this place has changed. So I'm right in the parking lot where the Starbucks used to be, and the Starbucks was in a building that used to be an Arby's decades ago, one of those vaulted roof looking Arby's buildings. And it appears to me that Starbucks was a real anchor for this whole part of Nob Hill, because this place is dead. There's a little alley between the Slice Parlor and the Flying Star Cafe. It had a mural for years, and they've changed the mural, which is interesting. It's a very different looking mural now, which I kind of like. So for years I took street photos in this part of town, and I wouldn't classify it as traditional street photography because I tended not to shoot pictures of people. One of the reasons was there's not a whole lot of foot traffic in Albuquerque. It's mostly car traffic, and a lot of the people that are on foot might be street people, things like that, that the photographs of those kind of people become very cliche, overdone. So it does remind me that I have this book called Implied Presence, and the whole point of the book was it was devoid of people. It was street photos without people. I'm kind of still interested in that whole idea of the implied presence of humans, the presence of businesses, and what that does to an urban area. Indirectly, you can see the effect of people there, but not directly. Oh, hi. Hey, welcome to the garage. Well, it's the next morning. And after I left the antique specialty mall with this typewriter in tow, I spent the rest of the day into the evening working on it. I knew the typewriter had an issue with the ribbon wasn't lifting, the vibrator wasn't working, and I didn't know what the problem was, but I just took a gamble that maybe it was just like a loose linkage or something like that. Turns out it was a lot more complicated than that, and it took me hours and hours of working on it. Well, it's a Montgomery Wards Signature 300, and it's in a lovely olive green color, and it's made by Brother. What was different about it to me, I hadn't seen one of these padded cases it came in, and the case is also kind of an olive green, which is kind of neat. The typewriter was filthy, and you might be able to see there's still some rust and grunge down inside the machine. It looks to me like this machine was left out in the wet somewhere, and actually deep down behind the platen I found several address labels to a Mrs. Margie Lopez of Los Lunas, New Mexico, who's probably the person who owned this machine originally. And it also came with two operator guides, one for the Model 300 and the other one for a Model 511. Both of these were in the case. And what I found was the problem with this machine was there was a screw, a nut, and like a shoulder spacer that actually holds the bell crank that operates the ribbon vibrator. Those were all missing, and I'm kind of pointing to the parts that I installed. I had to come up with my own parts to replace that. I didn't steal them off a typewriter. I just had a bin of spare hardware bits. And what I had to do to fix this machine, though, was something I've never done before, which is take off the entire carriage. You might notice when I shift the machine, you'll see that not only does the ribbon vibrator stay attached to the carriage, but even the spring motor down there is part of the carriage assembly. You take off the ribbon spools, and the whole ribbon mechanism, which is this bracket held on by two screws on the sides, this entire ribbon reversing and drive system for both the spools you have to take off. Here are these two screws. You remove those. There's some linkages you have to disconnect, mainly so this linkage connects both ribbon mechanisms, and it does the auto reversing of the ribbon. You have to disconnect that linkage and pull it out. And there are several linkages to, like the backspace mechanism. There's a bell crank right down in here for the backspace. Loosen the screw, take off the linkage, and underneath the machine there's a linkage for the space bar that attaches to the escapement. You take that off. Once those linkages are all off, then these three screws, there's 6 screws, 3 on each side. These 2 on the corners are machine screws, and the one in the center is a self-tapping screw, and this is what actually centers the carriage to its preset, the bearings to their preset factory position. So take those 3 off and the corresponding other 3 on the left side, and I found it necessary also to loosen this pivoting pin that does the articulation for the ribbon lift on the left side. Anyway, once you do that, the entire carriage just removes out of the machine completely. And of course you have to remember to disconnect the linkage for the actual vibrator itself. But once the whole carriage is out of the machine, you have ready access directly to the ribbon lift mechanism, and you can work on it directly and have good access to it. And I had to work on this. I had to actually pull it out twice because the first set of parts I put into it weren't quite doing the job. In fact, you can see maybe the bell crank is right here, and the screw, there's a nut that I installed with a brass sleeve in it that's a little bit longer than the nut that acts as a shoulder for the bell crank mechanism, and then there's the screw itself with the washer and the nuts on the back side. I only had one nut. This is, I don't know what size screw it is. I only had one nut that fit it, so my concern is that nut might come loose in the future, and I'll have to go and take this all apart again. Well, it's Tuesday and trash day, and I'm in my garage, as you can probably tell. So you might be hearing trash trucks outside picking up the trash cans. But so how does it type? Well, I did a little Rev Zero test typing last night on it, late last night, on the back of my Albertsons receipt. This is the creepy Albertsons. Anyways, it's not bad. There is a slight amount of shading on the top of the letters when you're using the black, the upper part of the ribbon. And that's simply because the ribbon is barely not quite lifting high enough. And so the letters are imprinting, so the top of the characters are right on the upper edge of the ribbon when you're using the black color. And it was more prominent when you were typing uppercase, but it's okay. It's not perfect, but it's okay. I did write a blog article late last night. I used that grocery store receipt writing as a rough draft and rewrote this blog article on a piece of lined notebook paper, and it looks all right. It's acceptable, but I also noted that it would be nice to come up with an alternative to having to use typewriter ribbons when you have a problem like this with a machine that's marginal quality. And so what I remembered is I had some carbon paper from Staples, my neighborhood big box office supply retailer, and we have to thank the tattoo industry for the fact that carbon paper is still around, because carbon paper is often used for tattooing, for transferring a pattern design onto someone's skin before they get their tattoo. So we have tattoo enabled carbon paper. But what I did as an experiment is I took a half sheet of carbon paper, and on the back side of my blog article I wrote another piece sort of just expounding upon what it is like writing with carbon paper. And maybe in the future, in the not too far distant future, perhaps we might have to resort to carbon paper if typewriter ribbons quit being manufactured, which, by the way, I don't think that's going to happen. I think there will always be entrepreneurs who want to satisfy a niche market need of typewriter ribbons, but I think we'll have typewriter ribbons for a long time. But in case we don't, a sheet of carbon paper, and in this case I left the ribbon color selector on the black setting so I could actually have an imprint of what I was writing on the front side, which then of course is transferred via the carbon to the paper. And it wasn't that bad, and I scanned this piece and put it on my blog article late last night. And of course when I scan it, I set the light and dark points and increase the contrast slightly, so it looks a little darker and a little easier to read on my blog than it does in person. But in person it's actually very readable, and so there's another viable idea for you guys, is to use carbon paper. And I was also writing about that in here, the fact that if you're a pen pal, if you're corresponding via letter and typewriter, let's say, to somebody, one of the problems that I have with being a pen pal is I sometimes forget what I wrote, because I don't write that often. And what did I write to that person like 3 months ago? What did I say? Well, the nice thing about having a carbon paper original is it gives you a archive of what you've written. You can file the carbon paper away and, hey, this is what I wrote. But there's an idea for you. So when I did start writing with this machine late last night, I noticed that the space bar was real clanky sounding. And so what I did in here, and you probably can't see it, but I got some adhesive craft felt. It's about 1/8 of an inch thick, and I put some pieces underneath here so that the space bar is padded both when it pushes down and when it releases. It doesn't rattle and clank. And the other little trick I noticed is the 2 pins that hold the ribbon cover onto their grommets. Sometimes the ribbon covers will vibrate on these brother machines when you're typing, and there's various ways of dealing with that. You can put some padding onto the little support pieces here, and these are like rubber, but they're really hard. That's one way to do it. What I did here is when I tightened down the left and right body pieces, this little screw, if you pull the cover out as far as it'll go and then with a screw in place and then tighten it, and do that on both sides, you're spreading these two bushings out slightly further. And what that means is when you put the ribbon cover in place, it holds the ribbon cover a little tighter. And that's one strategy for dealing with that. Of course, padding those pieces, those support pieces, is also a good way of dealing with that problem. But isn't that a beautiful typewriter? This olive green. I really love the Signature 300 logo. When I first saw this case, they had the typewriter sitting on top of it in the showcase. But when we put the typewriter away at the counter of the antique store, they sat it in the case like this, face up. And when I got it home, I was looking at it, and first of all, it was kind of hard to remove the typewriter from it this way. And secondly, I noted that the little label would be upside down if you did that. And so I had this idea that maybe it was intended for the typewriter to sit on the lid, where you can read that label in the correct orientation. And with a typewriter like this, you would simply close down the lid like that and latch it, and then carry it that way. And when you got to your destination, you could just open it up and remove it from the case. I suspect it was probably designed like that, even though it looks to be upside down. And then whoever owned it last, Mrs. Lopez, she clearly had it resting on this side, which would put the lid up. But brother made feet on the bottom side like this, so it almost like the brother intended it to be supported like that. And maybe you just open up the case this way and pull the typewriter out vertically. Maybe that's what they were thinking. There was a lot of this adhesive foam that was disintegrating, and these two areas right here are interesting, because what I found in the case, actually in the typewriter, was a rubber bumper. And I think these rubber bumpers, the other one's missing, but they probably go like this and like this to support the typewriter. Now, I noticed without any bumpers in the case, the typewriter tends to wobble a little bit and vibrate. And so I think what I'll do, just as an expediency, I'm going to just probably get some bubble wrap. I have a roll of bubble wrap, and I'll just put some bubble wrap in there to pad it. It's it was very grungy and filthy, and from the rust that was there still is in the bottom of the typewriter, it looks like this thing had been left in maybe an outdoor garage or something and got wet over the years. You can see, even with my best attempts at cleaning this, even using Neverdol and etc. metal cleaner, it's still pretty well rusted, these hinges are. But it's functional. It's the first time I've seen a case like this for a brother machine. Well, the purpose of my wanting to get out yesterday was to stretch my legs and do some walking and take some photos. And I did take quite a few photos with my GH3 camera, which I haven't really used all that much as a stills camera. We'll include a little slideshow of images at the end of this video, but this was a surprise. I didn't expect to find a typewriter and buy one, but my friend Kevin was over Sunday night, and he had brought a little brother-made machine that he recently acquired, and so we were both typing with brother machine Sunday night out in my man cave shed when it was raining. And so I was sort of already conscious of brother machines from the night before when I found this guy, this Montgomery Wards branded brother. But it's a very cool machine. It's just unfortunate that those parts in the ribbon vibrator, bell crank, pivot mechanism were missing. It doesn't type perfectly because of that problem. And so I might end up making this a giveaway prize at the upcoming Albuquerque Typewriter Fiesta, November 4th, the first Sunday in November at Penny Smith's Paper here in Albuquerque. Maybe I'll make this a giveaway. Someone might have fun with it. Well, I didn't expect to pick up another typewriter yesterday, and when you live in a situation like I do with a small house with limited storage, you can't just keep collecting typewriters, especially if you have a life partner and her feelings are also important. But one of the keys, I think, is honesty. You can't hide the typewriter. You can't sneak it in, or you shouldn't. Sneak it in and try to clean it while she's out, and then pretend like you've always had this machine. No, honesty is always the best policy. Be upfront about it, which is what I was. And she was initially, you know, exasperated. Oh, another typewriter. What are we going to do? More typewriters. But after she saw it put together in the pretty olive green color, she took to it a little bit nicer. And I told her, you know, we might not keep this. This could be a giveaway typewriter, you know. But when you're a typewriter collector, you have to balance your life with your passion for collecting. The biggest value this typewriter has to me was in the experience I gained yesterday in servicing it and trying to fix this ribbon vibrator issue. I'd never before taken off an entire carriage assembly like that, and I was very impressed after I figured out how to do it. I had to do it a couple times, as I indicated, but I was kind of impressed with how simple it is once you know what are the minimal amount of things to remove. It was very cool knowing that you just disconnect, take out both ribbon drive assemblies, disconnect three or four linkages, and then 6 screws, and the entire carriage pops out in one piece, including the whole escapement and the spring motor and everything. It's all one piece. So it's pretty straightforward, and it gives you ready access to everything in there, including the ribbon vibrator. Yeah, what I figured happened with this machine was the nut came loose on the back of the vibrator bell crank at some time in the past, and it worked itself off. The screw worked itself off, and those pieces just fell out and disappeared somewhere, unfortunately. Hopefully my fix will work for a while longer before I have to go back into it. Now, as many of you know, I've had this common problem with a lot of typewriters of escapement problems with escapement skipping. And interestingly enough, when I was servicing this typewriter, of course, I took a look at the escapement mechanism, and I noted it's built or designed differently than a lot of the like Smith Coronas and other American brands. But one thing I can say in my own personal experience, I don't know if this is universally true with a lot of other Brother typewriter owners out there, but I've never had a Brother typewriter with a skipping escapement. Maybe it's just the way they're designed, but they seem to just never have that problem. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope this gave you a little more confidence that maybe you guys too could get into servicing your typewriters, being a little more bold about taking them apart, working on them, using logic in terms of what needs to be taken apart to get to some other part. But this week I've had 2 major typewriter repairs, and I've learned a lot this week from working on the Sears Smith Corona Series 6 typewriter and this Montgomery Wards Brother typewriter. Well, until next time, you guys take it easy. Happy typewriter collecting, happy writing, stay creative, and have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.